All right, next up, we've got professional handicapper Rolf Michaels from WagerTalk.com. I'm going to chat some general postseason tournament betting strategies and take a look at the South region. Rolf, how's it going today, man?
Doing great, Adam. Appreciate it.
Well, nice and busy time of year here, to say the least, and we're going to spend a lot of time on the NCAA tournament here today. But, Rolf, I know you and I are both big proponents of this. We're trying to drive this point home on the shows as much as we possibly can. March Madness is fun. March Madness is great. March Madness is awesome. If you want to make money at this time of the year, it's in the NIT, CBI, and CIT.
Well, we can, in a nutshell, sort of compare it to the NBA regular season and the NBA postseason. In the NBA regular season, you're having to not quite the same, but in an anti-type style. NBA regular season, you're trying to handicap motivation every game. In the playoffs, you're not. Well, it's the opposite. In March Madness, everyone is motivated. There's no question. If you make the tournament, you're motivated. In the NIT, you're not motivated. You have teams that are motivated versus teams that are not motivated. You have very unique travel situations. You have very unique schedules. You have times that you don't even know who you're playing until a few days in advance. In the bracket, it is structured. You're playing Thursday or Friday. You're playing Saturday or Sunday. If you win, you know who you are playing. Your advanced scouts are working out all those game plans moving forward. So there's structure in the NCAA. There's non-structure in the other tournaments, and that's where you can find the value.
And you think about it, this is something that a lot of people probably wouldn't even cross their minds. But I'm thinking, for example, of a team like Brown that plays tomorrow night against UAB. They're playing on a weeknight for the first time since January 14th because they play that Friday, Saturday set of games. That's kind of different for them. When you've got the course load that you have in an Ivy League, something like that. Again, it may not matter against UAB. They're only a 2.5-point favorite, but still, it's something that kind of throws you out of your traditional rhythm. And, of course, obviously, there are plenty of travel spots and situations we could talk about in these tournaments.
Yeah, and let's just look back last night at New Jersey Institute of Technology, NJIT, and Quinnipiac. Those teams played on Monday. They found out Friday evening they were going to play each other and get scheduled. And you have a team like Quinnipiac, which shoots three-pointers left and right. Well, you haven't played for a week and a half. You don't even know who you're playing. You have 1 day of practice. How do you expect an offense to be in sync and in regular form when all of a sudden you're thrusted into that role? Let's practice Saturday. Let's travel Sunday. Let's go to New Jersey and play a game Monday. So, you have a lot of those situations where you have unique settings with teams being off for a week and a half, not knowing if they're going to play, then all of a sudden decide they're going to play, practice once or twice, and then play a team that's very unique. So, again, a lot of those situations, and the Brown point is excellent. I mean, that's something I hadn't even thought about. The Friday, Saturday schedule in the Ivy, now playing a midweek game is certainly a unique setting.
Well, and the thing about, the CIT is, the second round is, we don't even know what's going on. We don't know who's going where. There's a bunch of different things that go on with seeding for that tournament. And, it's just one of those things where a lot of shocks to the system. If you're Texas Southern and you're going to New Orleans, not that big of a deal. If you're Grambling State and you're going to UT Rio Grande Valley, not that big of a deal. Well, tomorrow night, Presbyterian goes from small town South Carolina to big town Seattle, Washington. I imagine they haven't played on the West Coast at all this year. If they have, it was way early in non-conference play. All of a sudden, you're traveling 3 time zones west, taking a flight that you're far from accustomed to, going to a city you've never been to before, and you're playing at 10 o'clock Eastern time. So how can you actually be focused on a game like that? I think it's very, very difficult, even if you don't want to play a full game. I think derivative opportunities in these CBI and CIT type formats make a whole lot of sense.
And again, you're a team that in Presbyterian that finished the Big South Conference tournament in the second round on Thursday, March the 7th. So you've been sitting around, you have 13 days in between games, not knowing if you're going to play, when you're going to play, and who you're going to play. So, Again, Presbyterian, certainly an offensive-based team. They win their games because they have a very efficient offense, and those are the teams that certainly can struggle out of the gate without that prep time and without some game experience for those shooters they have.
And something else I love about the CBI, CIT, and to a lesser degree the NIT, because there are, more household names in the NIT, but, everybody and their brother and their sister and their mother and their cousins and distant cousins they haven't talked to, everybody's betting March Madness, or everybody has some sort of investment level with a bracket or something like that. So when you enter that market in those NCAA tournament games, you're betting against everybody. When you enter the market for the CBI or the CIT, you're betting against the sharps and you're betting against the book. So you're betting against thousands upon thousands of public bettors. So, just by nature of, the efficiency of that market, I think that you can see a lot more opportunities in those other postseason tournaments than you can in March Madness, where the public does in fact move lines.
Well, let's go ahead and just use a sample today. And this is one of my plays to my client. And it's Providence, game 688 tonight. Providence is laying 6 to Arkansas. And Providence is a team that is very excited to get this tournament. They're going to have a significant crowd at the Dunkin's Donut Center. And in Arkansas, just like we saw in the bowls, we saw the first player make his name in the headlines, Daniel Gifford, saying he's not going to play because he's declaring for the draft. Well, you have your number one scorer and number one rebounder. For those that are Ohio State fans, if you watched what Ohio State was without Wesson, who was the number one scorer and the number one rebounder when he was suspended the last 3 or 4 regular season games, you see how much of a funk that will take out of a team. You also have an Arkansas team that Gafford rebounding is like 8.9 rebounds per game. The next person rebounding on the team doesn't even total 4 rebounds per game. You have a huge void against a very big physical Providence front line. So, if your number one scorer and number one rebounder is out in a tournament game, you're probably moving at 2 points and you may get some steam moving at more. In the NIT, it hasn't moved at all because you can pick out and find that value.
Now, one play that I really like tonight, and this will be one in my Tuesday 3-pack video, going to give that another shot since it's screwed up here this morning, but I'll put that over on our YouTube page today. Wright State, number 893 plus 13.5, taking on a Clemson team that went to the Sweet 16 last year. Also, another team in action tonight, Loyola Chicago. Obviously, everybody knows what they did last year in the NCAA tournament, and here they are playing Creighton in the NIT. And you sort of wonder about those teams that were in the big dance the previous year, made something of a run, at least won a couple of games. What is their mindset going into the NIT? I think those are interesting opportunities to take a look at as well.
Yeah, to me, you look at the first 4 out, and I don't think I've ever had a play on one of the teams that were the first 4 out that are automatically now the NIT's first number one seeds. That's the way the NIT works now. If you are listed as the first 4 out in the tournament, you are automatically a number one NIT seed. Those are automatic play against for me. Either you're going to play against them or you're not going to use the game. But I would never bet on that team because you have that lack of motivation. Now, let me say this. Moving forward, that's only for the first game and perhaps sometimes the second game. If you're into the NIT or the CIT or the CBI and you have 2 wins, at that point your mindset changes. Let's win this damn thing. We can go out as winners. You know what? How many teams in college basketball finish their last game with a win? There's probably about 8. The NCAA winner, the NIT winner, the CBI winner, the CIT winner, and some teams like Cleveland State that won their final game and didn't make their tournament. So there's only a handful of teams that could say, we won our last college basketball game. And again, after the first couple games, that mindset's totally gone. Don't worry about that number one seed playing against them because now they know they can go to Madison Square Garden, be on national TV, cut down the nets, and have momentum moving towards next year.
Yep, absolutely. And I think you make a great point there. And one other point I'll make about these, these lesser tournaments, in particular the CIT and the CBI, go to Wikipedia, go to the pages for these tournaments, take a look at how long it's been since some of these schools played postseason basketball. Those are teams you want to back, because those are teams that, irrespective of where they're going, what time the game is, who they're playing, their season isn't over yet, and they're very, very excited about that. If you've got a team that plays in the postseason year in and year out, they're in a place where they don't really want to be, they're in a tournament that they don't want to be in, that's not a team that I want to back. But if you've got a team, Grambling State is a good example here, where Grambling State last year would have been the number 1 seed in the SWAC conference tournament, but they were ineligible because of their APR scores. They haven't played postseason basketball in any context since 1980 in the NIT. I don't care where Grambling State's going. I don't care who they're playing. That's the type of team that I want to look to back.
Well, while I said don't back number 1 seeds and don't back teams that are disappointing, I've got a Blue Blood program that almost fits in that same scenario. Obviously, 1 or 2 years means about 20 years to the Indiana Hoosiers. Well, I'll tell you what. Indiana's excited about being in this NIT. They want to win it. I don't know if I'm going to lay the 18.5 with St. Francis tonight, but they weren't in the tournament last year. And 2 years ago, they had one of the worst performances ever, going to Georgia Tech in the first round of the NIT and losing. And those players remember it. So while you may look for 10 or 20-year spans, if you have a blue blood like Indiana that hasn't been to the tournament in 3 years, wasn't in any postseason action last year, and lost in the NIT the year before, they're a team that I will look to back after this game. And actually, I would back Indiana tonight if I had to pick a side, laying the 18.5. One more instance, teams can be very excited to play where they are. Utah Valley is a team playing in the CBI. Well, Utah Valley plays in the WAC. They knew New Mexico State was going to the NCAA. They knew Grand Canyon, as the runner-up, was going to the NIT. Their best shot, they're getting their best shot, was the CBI, and they're getting a home game. They won 2 CBI games 2 years ago. They won in the first round at home last year. They're excited to go this year. They expect to go to the Sweet 16. They're playing a Cal State Northridge team that's up-tempo and plays horrible defense. They're laying 11.5 or 12 tonight. The Wolverines are a team that I would look to back again this evening because they're excited to be in the tournament they are, no matter what it is.
So again, you can hear the excitement level in our voices. Our voices go up an octave or two when we talk about these other conference or these other postseason tournaments, because there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of chances to make money there. Again, not to say that all of these things are going to work out. The games still need to be played. There may still be talent disparities. Some teams just may not shoot the ball well in an environment that they're not accustomed to. But there are opportunities. There are starting points in those other postseason tournaments. And if you do your work, you do your research, you probably get some time equity out of this with some winning tickets, in especially things like the CBI, the CIT, and the NIT. All right, Rolf,
absolutely. Adam, before we jump to the NCAA, may I give our listeners one very eye-opening system to play in the NIT?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Home teams. Obviously, in the NIT, you have home teams the first few rounds before you get to New York. If you're a dog or a single-digit favorite, so mostly every NIT game that's not every NIT game early that's not a double-digit favorite, and the total's over 147. That's simple. Home team, not a double-digit favorite, with a high total of over 147. 33-10, 77% to the over. Teams don't play the same defensive intensity. Teams go out, they want to have fun. Teams don't run that snail pace that they're accustomed to. The teams that applies to in the NIT first round: Memphis, San Diego, Texas, South Dakota State, Davidson, Lipscomb, Texas, South Dakota State, Georgetown, and Harvard. I had Texas twice. So those 4 situations, I think there's one more tomorrow. 33-10 over under 77% in those higher NIT totals. So again, a different type of handicapping when you get to that tournament, but I think it makes total sense.
Oh, absolutely. I think it does make a lot of sense. And also too, if you've got a pace war here in one of those lesser tournaments, NIT, CBI, CIT, I would expect when we get to this point in the season, the team that plays at the higher tempo will dictate the tempo in that game. So you're probably going to get some teams that usually don't play very fast that, may even be pretty efficient offensively, they're probably going to speed up here too. So keep that in mind from a total standpoint as well. All right, Ralph, let's take a look at the South region here. I don't think Virginia is going to get beaten by a 16 again, and certainly not one that was a 4 seed in its conference tournament in Gardner-Webb. What about Ole Miss and Oklahoma? Who do you feel like Virginia is going to wind up facing in that second round there in Columbia?
Well, let me just start by saying this. This is just the most bizarre bracket I've ever seen, where the South has 8 teams that have a tempo of 325 or higher. So of the 29 slowest teams in all of college basketball, all 353 teams, 8 of them are in this bracket. Virginia, Kansas State, Wisconsin, Villanova, Cincinnati, Oregon, St. Mary's, and Old Dominion. Absolutely amazing. We'll see how Tennessee does, the 2 seed, which doesn't fit into that and actually has a decent tempo. So, just amazing that they put all the Virginia teams in the Virginia bracket, which play the exact same style. Will it help Virginia or hurt them? We'll see. But again, I've never seen a bracket so one-sided with one type of tempo. I think Ole Miss moves on, and we've talked about the reason why. It's simply the coaching. You have Kermit Davis, who was at Middle Tennessee State last year. Who was at Middle Tennessee State last year. Mississippi 12-20 this year, now 20-12. I like what they can do on the road. Yes, they finished the season losing 4 of the last 5, but you have a team that is has the upperclassman leadership, in a junior point guard and a couple other seniors that start. I think the coaching and the experience get them here, and I just think Ole Miss is a team that I will back with, a better offense, a solid defense, and a team that makes free throws. I mean, they are one of the best free throw shooting teams in the country. They're playing Oklahoma team that's in the 240s, so they're in the bottom half of the free throws. And I think those type of things in these close games make a big difference.
Ole Miss 2-point favorite here. There are some stray 1.5s out there as well. Total 142.5 for that game. That's the second game of the day on Friday with a 12:40 Eastern time tip-off. Let's go to Wisconsin and Oregon here as we move out to San Jose. This is really interesting to me. You've got an Oregon team that goes on a run in a bad Pac-12, wins the Pac-12 tournament, crushes Washington in the process. They get rewarded a little bit here by staying out on the West Coast, with Wisconsin, a 5 seed, having to make a long trip to San Jose.
I tweeted out a couple days ago, I went to read the Cincinnati newspaper, and we're going to talk about Cincinnati in a minute. They're the number 7 seed, and the headline in the paper said, Bearcats get hosed with a 7 seed. So my response was, would you rather have been the 6 seed and go to the Connecticut, or would you rather have been the 5 seed and play Oregon and go to San Jose? You're going to Columbus, 100 miles away. Be happy. Don't worry about what your actual seed number is. Look at the entire body of work and where you're going. I agree with you. I think Wisconsin got hosed. Oregon makes a short trip. Now, I know Oregon is the chic pick to pull the upset. It's one of those 5-12s. Well, all 4 5s won last year, and I don't buy into the 5-12s. Different teams are in different spots. Does a 12 upsetting a 5 shock me? No. Well, you have a team that's the 20th best team in the country, or the 5 seed, against a team that's the 48th best team. It's not that much of a difference. If you were playing conference play, you wouldn't even blink your eye, but you put a seeding in front of it, and all of a sudden people think it's a big gap from 5 to 12, whereas it's not. The thing I like about Oregon is this. Oregon needed to make adjustments. You had Bol, who was a 7'2" center, who was a 5-star person, who's going to be a first-round draft pick. Your entire offseason you built around Bol, the new Bol's son. And he gets injured after 7 games. Now you totally have to change your team. You go through your rebuilding process. You struggle. Well, you then get your defense going the way it's expected. You played UCLA. You're on the road. against UCLA, you give up 61 points in the second half against the Bruins. Well, since that time, Oregon has gone 8-0 straight up in ATS. They've held all 8 foes to 42% shooting or less. And in that span, after allowing 61 points in the second half to UCLA, they have only allowed 61 points for the entire game once in that 8-game stretch. I'm a fan of Oregon. Getting to the Sweet 16, I have them down. And, I don't think they could beat Virginia, but if they were in another bracket, they might have been going further than me.
Well, what's interesting here is the 5-12 game, it's usually that offensive juggernaut from a mid-major that everybody wants to back. Liberty is going to get love against Mississippi State. You're going to have Murray State get some love against Marquette. Everybody wants that team that's exciting, like the Dunk City, Florida Gulf Coast team, stuff like that. This is a very unexciting 12 seed. And quite frankly, it's an unexciting region for a lot of people. I mean, total of 119 wasn't even low enough for this game. It's down to 116.5 now. That's what's interesting to me is that, I'm always curious to watch line movement in games with low totals because I'm curious to see which side the public actually likes a little bit more. You kind of wonder if there's some recency bias to Oregon with that run in the conference tournament. And Wisconsin's just not an exciting team, hasn't been all year. So I just sort of wonder if, this winds up being one of those games where Oregon closes a favorite and Wisconsin does win. Not to take away from your thoughts on Oregon, but just to play devil's advocate some.
I'm gonna give our listeners another system here, and this isn't a great system, but it's just something to think about. It's back since 2000 and 2008. If you are a favorite, if you are a dog off a straight-up win against an opponent off a loss. So you only have 32 teams in the tournament, each of the 32 conference winners that are off a win. Everyone else is off a loss. A dog off a straight-up win versus an opponent off a loss, 49, 33, and 160%. Again, I'm not basing this Oregon play on that, but just something to look at. The people that won their conference that are on as a dog has been a 60% play in the tournament over the past decade.
All right, so speaking of teams maybe getting a little bit of a shaft from a travel standpoint here, Kansas State and UC Irvine, obviously in California, staying in the state of California in San Jose. Kansas State making a long trip. The status of Dean Wade obviously dictates a lot for this Wildcats team, but another game with an extremely low total on the board here. And you've got this Kansas State team, 4.5, 5-point favorite in that type of range, but this looks like one of those trendy types of picks, too.
Well, it's a trendy pick that I also like. I mean, the line's a little too low. If you said, what's your average line on a 4-13 game? What's your response going to be? 8, 9, 10? In that range. So to have this small of a favorite, obviously the way Irvine dominated their conference finals, beating Riverside by 19 and Long Beach by 18 and then winning by 28 against Fullerton. I mean, they're a team that has played awesome down the stretch. They're playing as well as anyone. But I look at Irvine and I say their best win of the year was against Texas A&M, which started the season about 100, the 100th best team in the country, and they won that game by 1 point. That's it. Every other top opponent they played, they lost to Toledo, they lost to Utah State, they lost to Butler. And those aren't great competitions. So when you've played, the 250th schedule, it's really hard to say how good you are. We know they're going to play slow. We know they're going to play big. They're a very good rebounding team. And Kansas State, I think, is probably able to use motivation in this game and say, hey, listen, we are one of the best teams in the country, and we are only giving this Irvine team a few points. Now, I am not going to pick K-State to even win their second-round game if Wade's not available. Kelly in Vegas, a good friend of mine who is a Kansas State alum and keeps me apprised of the K-State situation, she thinks Wade's out for the entire run from the people she talked to. So this Kansas State team is entirely different without Wade. Would it surprise me if they use the motivation of the short line to get past this win? No. Do I think they'll get past either Wisconsin or Oregon? I don't moving forward.
All right, so let's go to Hartford here. 6-11 Villanova St. Mary's, 3-14 Purdue and Old Dominion. This is an interesting little pod. I think Villanova's underseeded, but if I'm Villanova, I'd rather be a 6 and draw St. Mary's than be a 5 or, a 4 and draw, a mid-major that may be a little bit more dangerous. And then Purdue, not a great look in the Big Ten tournament. Matt Painter hasn't had a lot of NCAA tournament success. Game up as well as anybody does. These are two, kind of intriguing matchups.
Yeah, St. Mary's has 5 Australians again, like they always do. And, you saw what they did to the Zags, and Randy Bennett, deserves Coach of the Week for pulling off that upset and beating Gonzaga 60-47 to get here. But I'll also say this, is that when you're as familiar as St. Mary's is with Gonzaga, it's easier to find those intricacies to play against them, to control the tempo, to know what the weaknesses are. You are very familiar with the player. You are very familiar with their style. And listen, to me, I think the Zags benefit from losing anyway. So, how motivated are you when you talk to the Zags and they're 26-2 and it's late February? Are their goals to win the West Coast Conference, or are they bigger than that? 9 out of 10 players are going to say our goal is to win the tournament, not to win the West Coast Conference tournament. So, you maybe had a little Gonzaga look ahead with St. Mary's. I think St. Mary's gets a little bit shocked here with talent. Villanova's not the same team as they were, obviously, with 4 players drafted last year. But the guards having the physical talent they have is going to be able to move them forward. I would say this, though. I would say at halftime, whoever's winning continues to win. If St. Mary's is controlling the pace, is giving Villanova fits with the dribbling and the passing, then I think that they have enough to get on. If Villanova has the lead and has the athleticism where they're getting some breakaways, then I think Villanova pulls away late in the game.
What about Purdue? I mean, is Purdue vulnerable here? I mean, they're a pretty decent-sized favorite in this matchup, but you kind of wonder for Purdue. I mean, they are a 13-point favorite, but this is a team that never seems to maximize its potential.
Yeah, and, there's questions. There's questions around West Lafayette if Carson Edwards is really healthy. Down the stretch, he really struggled. He only shot 25% his last couple games. And without him, you look at the last couple games, you lost to Minnesota twice, and you beat Northwestern by 13. That's not impressive as well. So Old Dominion to me is a very live dog. I expect to have Old Dominion on my card. Jeff Jones knows how to get it done in the tournament, coming through CUSA and beating 3 very hot teams. Sometimes you go through your tournament and you get the benefit of the draw, and you're playing teams that just pulled the upset, and then you get them in that great spot. It wasn't the case. Old Dominion played a very hot Louisiana Tech, beat them. Played a very hot UAB, beat them. Played a very hot Western Kentucky, beat them. And what I liked is, you may say those 3 games were close, and they only won by a couple points each. That's a benefit to me. You come out of your CUSA tournament, you win a 1-point game against La Tech, you win a 2-point game against UAB, and then you pull away and you win a 6-point game against Western Kentucky. You have that confidence moving forward that if the game is close late in the second half, you're not going to fold. You can win that close game. So while some people like Irvine went through their tournament and blew them out, the exact opposite for Old Dominion. But you've got a quality offense. You've got a tempo that's going to be as slow as can be. Purdue doesn't mind slowing it down either. You're going to have a couple possession game late. You're going to have a couple possession game late in the game, and I think Old Dominion can clearly pull it off.
Real quickly here, the last little pod in the South we have to get to. We mentioned Cincinnati playing very close to home. I presume you expect them to move on and play Tennessee. What do you think about that game for the right to go to the Sweet 16 in Louisville if it is Cincinnati and Tennessee?
I'm not a fan of Cincinnati. I don't think they have enough scoring. I think they're actually going to even struggle against Iowa. I think they'll get by because, Iowa has played poorly down the stretch, but Iowa has scores. Iowa has 4 double-digit scores. I think they can keep it close against Cincinnati, although Cincinnati seems to be another chic pick. If Cincinnati survives, I think Tennessee gets by them. They don't have enough scoring. I think Tennessee also gets by the next round, and then we'll see what happens when they get to the Sweet 16.
Rolf Michaels, professional handicapper over at WagerTalk.com. What's going on over there right now, Rolf?
You know what? Check out the NBA Stat Sheet Daily. Baseball starting. Congrats. I know you put out a great product that's available online for baseball. I'll be doing the first pitch. The AAF logs are available. And, I want to leave it with one more angle. March Madness. This is in the main tournament. Double-digit favorites, a win percent of 90% or higher. 3-16 against the spread. That means fade Virginia, fade Gonzaga. Again, teams that win 90% of their games, I'm sure are looking past their first round, although Virginia probably isn't. Actually, I know Virginia's not. But again, double-digit favorites in the tournament with a win percentage of 90% or more. Houston, Gonzaga, and Virginia, 3-16 against the spread.
Rolf Michaels is working and find over at WagerTalk.com. He's a tremendous follow on Twitter at CalSportsLV. Appreciate the time as always, man. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Adam.